I was just hoping that you could check in about, or to maybe talk a little bit more about, is those relationships that you have cultivated with large funders. You talked about that difference from one year to the next, or from one of those billing cycles, pulling that back up from 2019 to, what was that, 2023. Those were the two jumps. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you have been able to build relationships, especially with government agencies, and be able to bring in large amounts of sustaining funding.
The questions are always with grants. They are project based and they are not usually renewable, but I think Leanna said this too. They are humans, they are people, and they generally want to do good work. And when you find the alignments, then they tend to reach out and reconnect with you. There is turnover too. Government right now is also having a lot of tumultuousness, and not all governments are the same. So I understand that. There are totally different dynamics in a lot of areas. But I think what really has been successful for us is diversifying, and that reflection piece. I glazed over this point, but it was pretty important. And that's who is benefiting from your service. Who are the people that are actually getting the most value out of what you're doing. We found alignments because the city's solid waste divisions and the county has a solid waste division. We draw that correlation between waste diversion, and we can bring in things like greenhouse gas emissions and global impact with tonnage. And then I think also that answers a question of a lot of communities that are marginalized and that are not usually included in conversations like this because they don't maybe have the time capital or even have the ability. So it's important to know, like, you can't possibly do it all, so don't find the right people to plug into. So building a brand around that is pretty important, and making sure that your message is clear and carried over. Leanna's templates were great, and I'm going to make my board look at everything that she said. Having that elevator pitch, having those opportunities, putting numbers to your successes. I can't say that enough, because I think that's what we tend to not do. We shy away from as nonprofits. We're like, oh, we're working super hard. But when you're like 180 tons of carbon, is that important? Okay. Just wanted to make sure that gets people's attention. And yeah, taking those risks would be the other thing, is just not being shy, because even your legislators are still humans, whether you like them or not.
At Shareable, we oftentimes will look at the project budget, right? What really would cost if everybody was paid fairly for their time? If we were to spend the market rate for the items and the materials we need to be able to do the project, knowing full well that if we don't get that full amount, we're going to figure out a way to use volunteers, to get used items, whatever it's going to take to be able to still do that project if it's something that we care about. Wondering, when you're doing that kind of budgeting for these grants, are you budgeting in for the fair market value of volunteer hours? What kind of pieces are you including in those budgets?
Yeah, I kind of debated adding more, but I was like, too much already. But there's something that I think is a key word. One word, just remember this: overhead. Ooh, it's a magic word, because that is something that can make an entire difference. But absolutely, like, adding value to all of the volunteer hours, quantifying that and making sure that those are reflected in any budget that you're calculating, whether it's on the cost side or if it's on your post. In a formal budget, you might not want to put those in, but in an annual report, you absolutely could, because those are calculable hours that people were working. And if you just go based on local minimum wage, or if you go based on half time, then that's still an undervaluation of what you've done. And I would say the same for things like checkouts, because you might not be preventing them from going and buying this new, but there's not a calculable way to know when that is the case and when that's not the case. And so the more we do, the better it's going to feed into all of those. elements.
I think the current estimated national value of each volunteer hour is $31.80. And so that's the, the worth of that in-kind contribution. As you were saying, you could include
Mhm.
in the end of your reports and everything else. Which if we had a base salary of $31.80, I think we'd be living in a very different society.
Yeah, there's a whole another segment if you get into grant reporting and management where there's in-kind donations, valuations, but also with the overhead and those as match funds. So a lot of places would like to see match funds. And so whether you are putting those into your formal budget, which is what I gave you guys the overview of, or if you're putting that into your projected project budgets, then that would be the difference there to see why does this program cost in paper this much, but in our expenses side only costs us this much. When I dove into this, I thought it was a little bit of a game, and it was a little bit of this sort of puppet show. Look over here, not over here, and you don't want to do that. You're good people. That's why you're here. That's not part of what you do. But when it comes to numbers and looking at projections, we also don't seem to value as a society the right things, and we are stewards of that, right? We're trying to enhance the value versus cost elements.
Great. Thank you. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Want to especially thank Amanda and Josh and Liana for speaking to us all once again and bringing their expertise from the libraries they're working with and in Washington and state and also in Maryland, and just the years of experience that is coming from this larger hive mind of established libraries of things that are joining us on this journey. So thank you all for being good stewards, not only of your own libraries of things, but also of the larger library of things movement. We really appreciate it.